Sexton, yeah.
And he was on this show called The Diary of a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like, deep into the trenches of, relationships and what makes them tick.
Yeah, especially because he specializes in high net worth individuals. So,
Right.
he's really seeing
He's seeing like the
biggies.
the top, the tip of the iceberg, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And what happens when
When it all falls apart.
falls apart.
Yeah.
And, I think it's safe to say that you're looking to understand the complexities of marriage.
For sure.
And what makes it last and, well, what causes it to sometimes just completely crash and burn.
Right. Because a lot of people, I think, have this idea of
Right.
marriage being forever. And
That's right.
Unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Not always the case.
That we know.
Right, so we're going to dig into some of those surprising things that Sexton has learned over the years.
Yes, we are.
Try to offer a little clarity, maybe some unexpected insights along the way.
Definitely.
And hopefully we won't get too bogged down with all the legal jargon.
Yeah, we'll
Try to keep it conversational.
nice and straightforward.
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting about his perspective is, like, he's dealing with the aftermath, right?
Yeah.
So for him, it's not theoretical. It's like
He sees it.
he sees the patterns.
Right.
And he sees, I guess, like the regrets and all that.
And the
fallout.
the fallout of all of it. And okay, let's get into some of those patterns, because he throws out some pretty startling statistics.
Oh, yeah. There are a few that stood out for sure.
Like this one, he says there's about a 56% chance
Oh, wow.
of a first marriage ending in divorce.
Yeah. That's almost...
It's wild, right?
It's basically a coin toss, isn't it?
Yeah, like we go in with this whole forever thing, and yet statistically...
It's more likely to end.
Yeah, more likely
than not, statistically.
than not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, based on what he's seen,
Yeah.
what are some of the underlying factors?
Right. Like, what's actually going on? Well, obviously, every case is unique.
Of course.
But he often sees, like, this breakdown in communication as, like, a major culprit.
Right, okay.
Because people stop truly listening to each other,
Yeah.
or they, like, just totally avoid having those difficult conversations
Right.
until it's just too late.
Yeah.
And then, he also talked about unrealistic expectations.
Right, which is, it's funny. We'll get into that later because it's kind of tied into
Oh, yeah, definitely.
the whole, like, social media.
The image that we project.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll get into that later. But,
Yeah.
And then, I mean, just fundamental...
Incompatibilities, yeah.
Incompatibilities.
That maybe weren't apparent at the beginning. But as you go through life and you grow,
Right.
people grow.
And change.
And sometimes they grow apart.
Yeah, and then they become huge issues.
Exactly, yeah. So that 56% divorce statistic is pretty sobering, right?
It is. But you know what's even, I think, more surprising?
Oh, what's that?
He mentions that 86% of people
Wow.
who divorce, they end up remarrying within 5 years.
That's a lot.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like the vast
Most
majority
people are going back for more.
going right back.
Yeah.
So what do you think is driving that? Is it just that innate human need to have a partner?
I think that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're social creatures. We crave that
Yeah, we want to be connected.
connection, that intimacy, that partnership.
Yeah.
And Sexton actually even refers to marriage as a kind of technology.
Oh, that's a show.
Yeah, it's like a way of navigating life together.
Right.
And even if people have had a negative experience with it, they still often believe in the potential benefits of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, okay, well, maybe I screwed that one up, but
Exactly.
this time it's going to be different.
This time it'll work, yeah.
Right.
But there's also, I think, like a degree of just like optimism or
Right.
hopefulness.
That this time,
Yeah,
I've learned my lesson this
Heck,
time.
this time I know better, I'll choose better.
I'll choose better.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's almost like that belief in marriage is so strong.
It's ingrained.
It's ingrained.
Yeah.
That even when it doesn't work, we still kind of go back to that as the default. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
And Sexton makes this great analogy. If someone said, oh, I'm going skydiving,
Yeah.
most people would be like, oh, be careful. That's dangerous.
You're crazy.
But when someone's like, oh, I'm getting married
Right?
after dating for 3 years, it's like automatic congratulations.
It's expected. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the next step.
Even though statistically,
Automatically.
marriage has a way higher failure rate
Right.
than surviving a skydive,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of crazy when you think about it,
That's a really good point.
you know?
Yeah, it makes you think about how normalized marriage is
Yeah.
and how romanticized it is
Right.
without actually considering all the work
And the intentionality.
and the effort
yeah, that it
that
takes.
goes into making it work.
It's just like, oh, you're getting married. Yay.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, hold on a second.
Right.
You
I
know?
mean, we need to pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And it also makes you wonder then, like, beyond just like the legal definition of divorce,
Right.
how many marriages are actually like struggling
Yeah.
or just like not fulfilling,
Yeah.
you know?
For the people involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it's not just black and white,
Yeah.
right?
No, not at all.
Like divorce or not.
Right.
There's a whole gray area in between.
Yeah. And he actually he expands on that, the definition of marital failure
Right.
to include those couples who like stay together but they're unhappy,
Yeah, for whatever
or
reason.
maybe for the kids.
Right, for the kids or financial security.
Yeah, exactly. And he estimates if you factor those situations in, the failure rate could be as high as 70–75%.
Wow, that's wild.
It's a really high number.
Yeah, so it's not just about like
Staying together.
staying together. It's about
It's about the quality
the quality, yeah.
of that relationship.
And I think that's I mean that speaks volumes, I think, to individual well-being.
Yeah, because staying in a relationship that's not fulfilling, that's not
Can be
meeting your needs, can actually be really detrimental.
Yeah, detriment. That's a good word for it.
Yeah.
You could be really doing yourself a disservice.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay, given all of this,
Yeah.
this potential for, complexity,
Mhm.
let's talk about prenups.
Okay, prenups. Prenuptial agreements, because
They're interesting, aren't they?
a lot of people, I think when they hear the word prenup, they automatically think,
Like planning for disaster.
yeah, lack of faith in the relationship.
Yeah.
Why are we even doing this?
They're like jinxing it almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but Sexton, he presents it as something way more pragmatic.
Oh, okay.
Like he defines it really simply. He's like, it's a contract
Okay.
that lays out the economic rules
Okay.
of the marriage in case it ends.
So it's like, setting the ground rules.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Like, we're on the same page. This is how things are going to work.
If things don't go as planned.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's made, presumably, when both people are amicable.
Right. Ideally.
Ideally. Yeah.
Yeah, before anything goes wrong.
And they're thinking rationally,
Right. You're not
not in the heat of the moment.
in the middle of a fight or anything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It's a calm and collected agreement.
And he's very clear on this point. Prenups are enforceable in the USA.
Okay, so
It's not just like a piece of paper.
it's not just a suggestion.
Yeah, it's a legal document.
It's binding. Yeah.
Bombing, yeah. And he even shared this story, and I thought this was crazy,
Oh, what's that?
about a prenup that included a clause about weight gain affecting alimony.
Oh, wow. Really?
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an extreme example.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah, but it really highlights just how much of a contract this is.
Right. Like it can cover a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So what kind of structure do these prenups usually take?
So he talks about this thing called the yours, mine, and ours model.
Okay. Yours, mine, and ours.
And it's basically like, okay,
So is that like what you bring in is yours?
yeah, the assets you bring into the marriage,
Okay.
they remain yours.
Okay.
Anything you acquire during the marriage is shared.
Okay.
And debts are handled pretty much the same way.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a way of keeping things.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway here is that, a prenup isn't just like
A one-time thing.
a one-time thing.
Right.
It needs to be
Revisited
as
life changes.
life changes. Yeah.
Yeah, because things change so much over time.
That's right. Like a prenup you sign when you're 25.
Right. When you're just starting out.
Just starting out might not be relevant when you're 45.
Exactly.
And you've built a life, maybe you have kids.
Right. Your whole situation is different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So it's about being adaptable, I guess.
And communicating. Right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
revisiting those conversations.
Right, exactly. And he also talks about, this kind of emotional hurdle that people have.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, if I suggest a prenup, that means I don't trust my partner.
Right.
Or I don't believe in the marriage.
Like I'm already planning for the end.
Yeah. But he uses this really good analogy.
Oh, what's that?
He's like, you don't get life insurance
Right.
because you expect to die tomorrow.
Right. It's
about protection.
a safety net.
Yeah.
In case the unexpected happens.
Right, exactly. And he's like, a prenup,
Yeah.
in his view, is kind of like that.
It's about security.
Yeah, it's about providing financial security.
Yeah, and clarity, regardless of what
Right,
happens
regardless.
down the line.
Yeah, and I thought that was a really,
Reframing.
yeah, it reframed it in a way that
It takes away the stigma, I think.
totally takes away the stigma.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's not about expecting failure. It's about being responsible and being open,
Open communication.
having that open communication about, finances
Yeah, which is so important.
from the get-go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And he even mentioned sometimes just having that conversation about the prenup
Yeah.
can lead to an engagement ending.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So he's like, be cautious.
No, it can be a deal breaker.
It can be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't just give in to, a request for a prenup
Right.
just because you feel pressured.
Yeah. Or intimidated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's not a good foundation for a marriage.
No, not at all. And I think, if someone's really resistant to even having that conversation
Right.
about finances,
Like, that's a red flag.
that's a huge red flag, I think.
Yeah.
And he even goes so far as to say a prenup can actually be a romantic act
Oh, how so?
because it demonstrates, a commitment to fairness
Right.
and to protecting each other.
Even if things go wrong.
Yeah, in the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
it's like, I've got your back.
It's like, we're in this together.
Yeah, no matter what.
What?
No matter what.
And I thought that was
It's a different way of looking at it.
it's a really cool way to look at it.
Yeah.
So it's like removing that potential source of conflict
Right.
from an already like highly emotional charged situation. Yeah, like divorce is already messy enough.
Right. Exactly. So
Yeah, so it makes sense to like try and minimize the potential for
the drama.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about a specific part of prenups that I think is really interesting
Okay.
and kind of controversial. And those are fidelity clauses.
Okay, fidelity clauses. Now, those are the ones that outline like financial penalties.
Yeah. If one partner
Cheats?
cheats.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah. And, so what's Sexton's legal take on these?
Well, he's a lawyer, so
He's in the trenches.
he's seen it all.
Yeah. And he's pretty blunt. He's like, they're a terrible idea
Oh, wow.
legally.
Why is that?
Well, one of the biggest things is, like, how do you even define cheating?
Yo, we're
Like,
there.
is it just, like, the physical act?
Yeah,
What about, like, emotional affairs?
right. Or online interactions.
Right, like, where do you draw the line?
That's true. It's a gray area.
So gray, yeah. And so he's like,
So how can you enforce something that's not clearly defined?
right.
Yeah.
And he's like, infidelity isn't just this one thing.
Right. It's not black and white.
Yeah, like a, one-night stand
Yeah.
is very different from a, like, long-term affair.
Yeah. Emotionally,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, and he also touches on, like, the different perspectives that men and women
Yeah, I was gonna say.
often have about infidelity.
Yeah, because I feel like sometimes men, they're more focused on like the physical act, whereas women, it's more about like the emotional betrayal.
Yeah, like, you lied to me.
Yeah,
You broke my trust.
exactly.
And so it's just, it's so complicated.
So a fidelity clause, like it wouldn't really capture those nuances.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then from a practical standpoint, he's like, are financial penalties even a deterrent?
Yeah, I mean, if someone's really determined to cheat,
Right.
are they going to stop because they might lose some money?
Right. He's like, it's kind of like saying,
It's not going to solve the underlying problem.
yeah, he's like, if we make something illegal, that'll eradicate the desire for it,
Exactly.
which is obviously not true.
Right.
And it kind of goes back to that whole thing of,
The root of the problem.
yeah, like, why?
What's actually causing these issues?
Yeah, why are these marital problems happening in the first place?
Right, exactly.
And infidelity is often
What's a symptom?
a symptom
Yeah,
of a bigger issue.
it's not the cause.
Yeah, so trying to slap a financial penalty on it
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
is not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, you gotta address the underlying issue.
Totally. Yeah.
So it sounds like Sexton's seen a lot of these messy situations.
He has. Oh man, and it's interesting because he notes
Yeah.
that a lot of times people will come in and they'll tell their side of the story,
All right.
and it's always
They're the hero
they're the hero
of their own narrative.
of their own narrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and he's heard some real doozies, like people leading double lives
Oh.
with like multiple families.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Isn't that wild? And then affairs with close relatives, which is
Oh, that's Yeah, it's a whole other.
It's a whole other level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this phenomenon he calls the nanny fascination.
The nanny fascination. Okay, what is that all about?
So this is his observations from dealing with, a lot of wealthy clients.
Okay.
And he's noticed this pattern
Okay.
where the nanny becomes
Oh, it's like, yeah, like an object
of affection.
Yeah, and it's almost like,
Because it's easy to see how that would happen.
well, he theorizes that
Right.
it's this dynamic where the nanny is providing support.
Right. They're taking care of the kids, the house.
Yeah, but without uh the autonomy of a wife.
Okay.
So it's almost like a
A simpler
like,
dynamic.
like a less complicated relationship.
Right, because there's not
Yeah.
as much baggage, maybe?
Right. And then he gives this somewhat provocative advice
No. What's that?
for wives.
Okay.
And he's like, embrace your nanny side.
Embrace your nanny side. Okay, what does he mean by that?
He's like, pursue your own interests.
Yeah.
Have your own things going on.
So, maintain your individuality.
Yeah, maintain your individuality within the marriage to keep that.
To keep things interesting.
Yeah, to keep that spark alive. And I thought that was
It's an interesting perspective.
it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's not what I expected.
No, not at all. And he also shares this really tragic example
Oh, no.
of the consequences of
Oh, this is the extreme case.
feeling completely trapped in a marriage.
Okay.
And it's this case where someone resorted to violence, murdered their family, and it's just
That's awful.
it's a really dark
Yeah, it's a reminder that these things can go really wrong.
yeah, it's a reminder that these things are serious.
Yeah.
And they can have
Devastating.
devastating consequences.
Yeah.
And he also acknowledges the emotional toll
Oh, yeah, I bet.
that this work takes on him.
Yeah, being a divorce lawyer,
Yeah, he's
you're dealing with people at their worst.
at their worst.
Yeah, it's got to be tough.
Yeah, so I mean, it's heavy stuff.
It's intense.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
to another major area that causes friction in marriages. Money.
Money. Yeah, and he talks about how
This is a big one.
money is a constant source of conflict. And he says it's more than just
Dollars and cents.
dollars and cents.
Right, it's symbolic.
It's so symbolic, yeah.
Yeah, it's about power,
Power controls,
opportunity,
security. Yeah. And he talks about how economic disparity between partners
Right.
can create a lot of stress.
Right, because it creates an imbalance
Yeah.
of power, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. And also sudden changes in financial situations.
Right, like if someone loses their job.
Loses their job.
Yeah,
That can really
throw things off.
Yeah, and he even says it can manifest differently
Oh, interesting.
based on gender,
Right. So men and women might react differently.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes the importance of financial transparency
Down here and see.
between partners.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because he contrasts the legal obligation to disclose all your finances
Right. During a divorce.
during a divorce
Yeah.
with the ideal of
Being honest and open
being honest and open during the marriage.
throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and he talks about this thing called mandatory discovery,
Okay.
which is basically in a divorce you have to
You have to reveal everything.
reveal everything.
These are financial details.
Yeah, and that often uncovers some
Surprises.
surprises. And he's seen the lengths that people will go to
hide assets.
hide assets.
Yeah.
And the legal ramifications of that.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm sure
There are legal ramifications.
there are consequences.
Big time.
Yeah, you can't just hide money from your spouse.
Right.
Especially during a divorce.
Especially during a divorce. Yeah, and he even notes how often
Yeah.
there's a lot of debt
Oh, interesting.
that's masked by this appearance of wealth.
So people look wealthy on the outside.
Yeah, they've got the house, the car.
But they're actually drowning in debt.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's really fascinating. And
That's deceptive.
and he even tells a story about a lottery win.
Oh, wow. A lottery win.
Yeah.
You'd think that would bring people closer.
You would think, but in this case,
But it led to divorce.
it led to divorce.
Wow, that's ironic.
It is. It is.
So I'm curious, how do all these themes apply to LGBTQ plus couples?
That's a great question. And Sexton suggests that a lot of the core challenges
Okay.
are pretty universal.
Okay.
Like the impermanence of relationships,
Right.
the soulmate myth.
Yeah, the idea that there's one perfect person out there.
Right, like
Ah.
we're all dealing with that, but
Yeah.
he also points out that, LGBTQ plus couples,
Right.
they might have a greater freedom
Okay.
to define their relationships.
On their own terms.
Yeah, because they've historically existed outside of like the traditional marital structure.
Right, they've had to create their own rules.
Right, and he also points to, the evolving legal landscape.
Right, because marriage equality is relatively recent.
Yeah, it's relatively recent.
So it's still, like, things are still changing.
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, what about open relationships?
Yeah, open relationships, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, like is it a viable model
Right, does it work?
or is it just like a recipe for disaster?
Yeah.
And Sexton's a little cautious on this one. He's like,
Okay.
my experience as a
Yeah.
divorce lawyer
He's with people who are getting divorced.
is with people who are getting divorced. So
So you're seeing the failures.